Hello, I'm James Milan. On their accreditation visit to Arlington High School in the spring of 2013, members of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges stated that the low quality of the facilities produced a negative effect on its learning environment. Problems with crowded classrooms, unsafe labs, and dirty hallways have plagued AHS for years, and the continuing growth in our student population threatens to make the situation even worse. This month, the Arlington School Committee and Town of Arlington submitted a plan to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or MSBA, which issues grants for capital improvements in local public schools, about how to best rebuild the school. Joining me to talk about this is Dr. Kathleen Bodie, Superintendent of Arlington Schools. Dr. Bodie, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Jane.
Appreciate it very much. I alluded to this a little bit in the introduction, but I wanted to first just to ask that open-ended question: why does the high school need to be renovated?
It needs renovation almost in every way you can look at it. If you just simply look at it from the point of view of the building, it represents actually 3 different buildings built at different times, and the oldest building was built over 100 years ago. All of the systems in the high school need to be updated or entirely replaced, and that includes heat, electricity, lighting, plumbing, the roof, our boilers. We've replaced 2 of them, but 2 of them, which are the backups for the 2 that we have replaced, are very, very old. There's virtually nothing in the high school that does not need, at the physical building level, updating. Programmatically, we need to have a renovation because our classrooms, first of all, are too small. If you were to look at the recommendations for classroom sizes from MSBA, only 23% of our classrooms meet the minimum square footage, which poses a problem when our class sizes are growing, makes classrooms very crowded, but it also poses a safety problem in our science labs when you're having a lab experiment and you have too many students in the space that we have. So there's issues around security. There's also issues for ADA compliance, which is disabilities. We have 1 elevator, old, and some people won't even ride in it, though I assure people that it is safe. It is safe. I ride in it occasionally. But there's only 1 elevator, and it is in the furthest building away, the Fusco building. And so if you were to be a student that needed to use the elevator regularly they were on crutches for a while, you would have to go all the way to that elevator to go up 1 floor, and then maybe have to travel almost, you could travel a quarter of a mile, no, not quite, but you could travel a long distance to your next class. So it's something that when we rebuild the school, we're looking to have 3 elevators. With security, one of the big issues for a high school is that the number of points of potential egress. Right now we have about 35 entrances. Now there's over 50 doors, and some of the doors now you can only leave from the door, but we've taken the exterior handle off. But we need to have more surveillance equipment. We also need to have more alarm system, and all of these things are very expensive, which would be part of a renovation.
I was wondering, as I mentioned earlier, the NEASC comes in to a high school every 10 years or so to reaccredit that high school. Without that visit, I assume obviously you were aware of this array of issues that you've just mentioned, but was there much discussion or movement forward around all these things, even preceding the visit from the NEASC?
Almost certainly. We've been talking about the need for renovation for the school for some time. I think what the NEASC report did was put it in high relief for everyone that what is happening in the high school is we're getting amazing results. Students are achieving at very high levels, and yet the facilities do not match the level of achievement. And basically what they're saying, Arlington students deserve a better environment for learning. They they did talk about the limitations. They also, I mentioned in your opening, you talked about dirty hallways. I assure you that has
Been
a lot
mitigated.
of that's been remediated. Our custodians and our facilities maintenance people do a terrific job of really trying to keep the building as clean as possible. But it is a challenge all the time because the materials, the floors, are very, very old. And as a result, they're more porous, they're more difficult to clean. It's a challenge every day.
What can you tell us about what stage the planning process for this renovation? Where are we at in that planning process right now?
Well, I think that as people listening must know, last year we submitted a statement of interest to the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We were one of over 200 applications. And while we might have made it further along the line of consideration, we were not funded last year. Actually, it's not so much funded last year. We were not invited into the process to look at what Arlington High School needs. We have updated.
So that's the first step
That's the
in
very
a process
first step.
that would lead to funding, I guess?
Yes, you have to submit a statement of interest, which doesn't solve the problem, it just states the problem. And in all of the different categories that you think for the reason why the school needs to be renovated or rebuilt. We did this for the Thompson School as well. And through that process, it was determined that it made much more sense to just rebuild it. Renovation was on the table, renovation addition was on the table, and that's what you go through with the MSBA, is determining what is the right choice, what is the most economic choice to meet the needs and to provide the best learning environment. So I don't know what the outcome will be, but what we did to state very clearly the issues. And I mentioned some of those in my long first answer to you about just the building itself, the programmatic issues, ADA compliance, security, all of these issues.
Yeah, I think it must be kind of an odd situation, just parenthetically, to deal with an application like that, because while you're at once proud of the results that you're achieving and how well your students are progressing, et cetera, you must be needing to make quite an alarmist case around the physical plant and the effects of that in order to make this kind of application and make it persuasive.
Well, you've hit on a very important point. On one hand, I want to state very fairly the security issues, but at the same time not be alarmist. And I'm not. So it's a fine balance between really stating what is, or if we're talking about programmatic issues or safety issues. Again, it's state what it is, but at the same time, do I think that our children are safe in the building? And the answer is yes. Could we have more up-to-date security? Absolutely. But right now, to put some things in would be very expensive and require extensive rewiring. And it doesn't make sense to make that investment at this point if we're planning to do something much more major.
So I think to move on to another topic, I think that certainly our audience is aware, as you and I are well aware, of the fact of increasing student enrollment in the schools over the last little while and anticipated to continue in the future. So what do you anticipate student enrollment to be over the course of the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
It's growing. That we know. In the last 3 years, we've added 450 students. So it's roughly about a 3% increase each year, which is a very rapid rate of increase for a school system. 450 students is another school. And to give a more concrete example of what we're seeing, our current high school classes are all in the 300s. But our
so that's
current
300 so something per grade.
320, 350 students. But this year's kindergarten is over 500. Right now it's 513. And we're seeing that the number of children that are being born in town are also increasing. Whereas, for example, the class that will enter kindergarten next year, if we were to look at the number of births in the year that they were born, there were 560 births. Now, one of the other trends we look at is what what is our retention rate from grade to grade, and then certainly from entering kindergarten, we look at what our retention is from the number of children born in that year. For many years, that rate was anywhere from 83 to 90%. This year, it was 100%.
Really?
Yes.
Every
100%.
child born of kindergarten age?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that
Wow.
it's the same children.
Sure.
It just means
but
the
it was
number.
the same number.
Same number. And we see this.
That's remarkable.
Yes, it is. Well, if we have 560 born next year, I don't know quite. That'll be a challenge. That'll be a challenge. But as we look at our schools, we are continually challenged for space. And because this is very complex and we want to really know where the growth is both by school, by town, this year we put out to bid an offer to have an architect do a space study for the schools. And we were able through that process to select an architectural firm that is currently working on that plan. And part of it is to have a demographer do another analysis of our enrollment. And this person does a much more extensive than what we could ever do in-house. They look at home sale trends, age of the residents in town, different parts of town. There are a lot of factors that they look at to give us sort of an eye to what we might expect over the next 5 years, 10 years, which is a little different than looking at the number of students that are born in a given year and seeing what the rate of retention is.
What plans are being made now to deal with this influx of more students into the system?
Well, first of all, understanding if our numbers are an aberration or this is going to continue. Just judging from births, I would say this is going to continue, which is a compliment to the town. It means a lot of people want to live in Arlington, and I take it as a compliment to the school system as well. Our students do perform very, very well. In terms of other types of plans, for example, we are going to be doing the last renovation of an elementary school the year after next, and we're in the planning process now, and hopefully town meeting will approve the funding for that this next month.
That's for the Stratton School.
So you're asking me, how are we planning for some of this enrollment growth? The classes that are at the elementary school right now, which are large, and from grades 3 down, they're over 450. These classes are going to be coming into the middle school. And we're going to need more space for classrooms there. And so we're combining the need for more space at Ottoson with the plans we're having for Stratton. And so we unlike past renovations, we don't have enough space in our elementary schools to house the students from Stratton. So we're going to have to house them during the renovation in modular classrooms. And we're going to put some of those modular classrooms, which are going to be permanent modulars, at Ottoson to deal with the anticipated enrollment growth there.
So the same permanent modular classrooms that will serve the Stratton students during their own renovation will then stay there and be available for the increased growth at the Ottoson.
Right. Because right now the town is funding the Stratton renovation, but really our focus in terms of the next building to be done in any kind of renovation is the high school. Mm-hmm. So while Ottoson, puts it way down the road, and yet their need is going to be there in the next year or two.
Right. Actually, will precede the need, and in those terms of the high school. Although clearly there are many other factors for why it's particularly exigent to get to the high school as soon as we can. A couple of other kind of issues that touch on this same question of increasing enrollment. I know that Arlington is looking hard now and in the next couple of years at its own commitment to the Minuteman Tech high school, the vocational high school that's available and accessible to Arlingtonians as to members of or students from other towns in the surrounding area. And I know that there's at least a chance that Arlington will not be sending the students that it sends currently to Minuteman. At some point in the not too distant future, perhaps that will stop. Are there any particular plans or, again, discussions happening around how the high school would deal, again, with that influx potentially of students? Not large in number, but perhaps large in need.
Well, about 2 years ago, I looked at the list of courses that our students apply are in at Minuteman, whether it's auto, plumbing, electricity, and none of our students are in a particular trade or area of study which has a lot of students. So if you were to bring something like auto, that's just something that we simply could not reach out to. So, but let me just back up here for a second. It's not clear really what is going to happen with Minuteman. There are member districts that right now there's an uncertainty as to whether some of the districts are going to approve the new agreement, which I don't think that you really want to go into that kind of discussion right now.
Not in great detail
here.
No.
No. But the issue is, do we need a vocational school? I think that we do, as a region, need some ability to have students have access to these programs, because any individual school really does not have the ability to offer a very expensive program for 5 or 6 students. So what some school districts do even presently, for example, Medford and Cambridge is a good example. If Cambridge has a program that Medford doesn't have, they may send a student there and vice versa. So you might see more of that should a regional school no longer exist. You might see more
kind of collaboration
around different programs, and you know, maybe this school will have these programs, another school will have. There are a lot of complexities in that kind of an arrangement, which would need some very thoughtful, very thoughtful study, because it is complex. It's easier when it's a couple of schools just doing it, but for a large region, it would be more difficult.
Each new school that would seek to become part of such a collaboration, or that it would make sense to include, you're going to introduce a higher level of complexity all around.
It's possible Minuteman will exist as it is with just capital repairs. That's another possibility.
Absolutely, and I didn't want to overstate that. I just know that there may be a possibility that we might be looking at accommodating within Arlington the students who currently are at Minuteman.
Should we be accepted into the next phase of the Massachusetts Building Authority process, that would be something that would be important information to have at that point in terms of the planning of the high school. Maybe we have a high-tech component to it, and we have some of the more trades go some other places, because some schools do have these programs.
Another thing that's much on the minds, I think, of Arlingtonians right now is the fact that there's an issue around the Mugar property that is currently being considered for development, and at least the proposed development would include a lot of new residential housing, which we assume would bring further numbers into the school system, which we assume the potential developers, don't have to take into account, but you clearly do.
Yes.
How does that look?
Well, it's hard to say at this point how long it's going to take a project such as that to actually develop. It could be years in the process. So having said that, it's definitely down the road. What the developer did say to our town manager is that a similar development they had, I believe, it may be Reading, but I'm not entirely 100% positive on that, had 50 students. I think for Arlington, that would be a very conservative number, given the location right next to the Red Line. I suspect that it would be more, but I think that this project probably would be in the 5 to 8 years out in terms of reality, should it happen at all. So that's very uncertain. But yes, we would expect more students, and and the number of students would be in the area of town where we're already seeing great growth. Mm-hmm. In fact, Thompson was built with the idea that we needed to fill it. Well, it's filled, and as we go, if we continue to have enough students to have 4 kindergartens, which it was not designed for, to have 4 first grades, it was designed to have perhaps 4 kindergartens, but they would blend into 3 grades after that, 3 classrooms after that at each grade. That school is going to be out of space in a very short time. And the same thing is true at all of our elementary. We have a classroom here or there sprinkled through the district. We do not have a lot of capacity. Without additional classroom space, we're going to be looking at larger class sizes. So we really do need to plan for if there's going to be this surge in enrollment, or I should say it's so much a surge as there's this continuous increase, a steady increase at that rate, where are we going to put the classrooms? Addressing
those Arlington residents who, without children in the school system at the moment, how do you make the argument that the cost of the renovations, we're getting back to the high school now, that the cost of the renovations will bring benefits, commensurate benefits to the Arlington community?
Well, I think you can look at it from a couple of angles. One would just simply be the value of your property. When you have a very strong school system, one thing you're not going to lose is property value, and that we saw that during the last recession. Arlington was one of the few communities in the state that did not lose value in their homes. You can look at it through the lens of the state economy. We want to have an educated populace so that we have a very strong economy in Massachusetts. And having educational facilities, your local high school or your community college, these are investments in the future of the whole state. I think the third way to look at it is sort of as adults, our moral responsibility to the next generation. That it is our obligation to provide our children, whether they're our children, whether all our children, with an excellent education. And what we have right now is a facility that we're doing well in, but it is having so many issues that it takes so much time and energy to constantly be vigilant about, that's not where our resources should be going. Yes, there'll be a first-time investment in this, but over the long haul, certainly all of the repairing and patching that goes on constantly will cease for a period of time anyway.
Yeah, and speaking of that investment from another perspective, we know that the MSBA, Massachusetts School Building Authority, is a potential source of some funding to help to fund the renovations. Where else will that money come from?
For the Thompson School, we started out at 48% contribution from MSBA, and it went up as we were able to get points through energy initiatives in the building. So essentially, we're a little over 50%. I don't know if that will be the percent we would have at the high school, but it's going to be in that vicinity. So that's half of the cost of this, and that's a huge investment on the part of the state. Where the other part would have to come is from the taxpayers of Arlington, and that would go on the tax rate as a bond that would be probably taken over 20 years. I would assume so.
If students are going to be displaced, and I assume some of them are, where will they be moved to, and for how long? How will that play out?
That is a challenge. And so a lot will need to be thought about in terms of what we would do. Of course, some people would say, well, why don't you build the high school on the field behind, which is Pierce Field? And that might be problematic only because that was a heavy metal site that has been encapsulated, and the field is there. I don't know whether you can build there. So I'm sure that if we get invited into the eligibility period, there's different phases of this. These will be all things that will be thought about in terms of what the options would be. Similar, we have school districts around us that are in the same situation we are. Winchester is right now in the process of renovating, doing a renovation addition to the high school. But like Arlington, they don't have any place to house their students during the renovation. So they have planned it so that the students are actually on site, and it's a phased project over 3 years. So when we talk about where we are right now, let's assume that we are accepted into the process. The first stage is roughly 270 days. It can be shorter than that, but no longer than that, in which you go through an eligibility. It has, I won't go through all the different pieces that have to put in place. But then you go through a feasibility study, which is where we'll look at all of these different options. And then you have to go into a phase where you do the schematic drawings for the project, which will take at least a year or more. And then you begin construction. So at the earliest, under the best case scenario, we would probably be 3 to 4 years out before we even did shovel to ground.
There are also town offices and other programs that are housed in the high school. What would happen to those?
That would be all part of the planning as to where they would have to be situated. Maybe administration moves out. These are all, there will be lots of variables that we could consider as to how to do this. Actually, in some respects, we're in a more ideal situation than even Winchester, the way their high school is constructed. We have 3 separate buildings. So it might be possible to work with that design a little bit easier than what they had to work with.
If parents have questions, concerns, things they want to bring to your attention or get their own issues addressed, who should they contact or how?
Well, they can, I suppose it depends on what the issue is, but probably any issue. They can certainly contact me at my email address, and I assure you that I receive plenty of emails from parents on a whole
They
range
wouldn't be
of
the first, yes.
the whole range of issues, which is terrific. I try to respond as soon as I can. Sometimes they're more delayed than I would like, but yes, they can do that. There are also they can talk to the building principals, their PTOs, because that also becomes ways that information gets funneled back to me. And certainly I get a lot of information from that in that kind of flow chart too.
Okay. Well, it is an enormously ambitious and important and complex issue that we've been talking about here today, the renovation of the high school and the general increase in the student population in Arlington. On the whole, I have to agree with you, though. I think it's mostly very good news for Arlington. It means lots and lots of people have decided that they want to raise their families here, which of course includes an investment in and a belief and faith in our local school system.
And I take their belief and faith very seriously, as does all of our teachers. You know, while it's a challenge, at the same time we really welcome all the people that have chosen to come here. And I will also say that it is all the people who are coming are also expanding our diversity as well, which is also another plus.
Yes, it's something I've noticed from being a resident in the town for about 20 years now, and I'm delighted by, frankly. So thank you so much for coming in to talk to us today. We really appreciate it.
Most welcome.
Arlington High School is not the only school that is planning renovations. As Dr. Bodie mentioned, this summer, Stratton Elementary plans to begin a 1-year construction project to repair and replace its cafeteria, auditorium, and school office spaces. Over the next few weeks, we will further explore the future of Arlington schools and the challenges they face in a new series called Building Arlington's Schools. For Arlington Public News, and on behalf of Dr. Bodie, this is James Milan. Thanks for joining us.